I want to welcome you to Becoming One. This is going to be an exciting study, and we're talking about intimacy, the issue of how we can grow closer together as a couple, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And we're also talking about the enemies of intimacy and how we can overcome challenges in the area of intimacy to become really the couple that we want to be, having the relationship that we want to have. We're going to get very real. You know, all of us as couples have issues and challenges, and so we're going to talk in a very real terms about the things that all of us deal with. And I want to encourage you, as you're going through this study, listen for yourself, not your spouse. You know, you're going to hear some things said to your spouse that you're going to be glad that they heard. And when you hear something said to them that you know they needed to hear, don't elbow them, don't stare at them, don't yell, praise the Lord, or anything like that. Just, keep your cool. On the way home, and when you get home, talk about what you heard. Talk about maybe something that you heard that you needed to hear and changes that you're going to make in the relationship because of that. And I'll tell you, when you focus on yourself and you talk about yourself, your spouse is really going to like it. It's really going to help to open up conversation that's going to help you to grow in your marriage. You know, some of the things that you hear during the study, you're going to hear them. It's instantly going to work. Some of the things that you hear maybe take a little bit of time to work out. But one way or the other, this is going to be a great study. You're going to grow in your marriage, and the time that you're investing in your marriage is going to reap great dividends. God bless you. I hope you enjoy this.
Marriage Today presents God's Purpose by Jimmy Evans.
This is a scripture in Luke chapter 10. And Jesus is being confronted by a person. It says, a lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, What is written in the law? What is your reading of it? So he answered and said, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You have answered rightly, do this and you will live. In Matthew 22, Jesus said that's the main commandment that encapsulates all the commandments in the Bible. And it's interesting in this text here, heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I know sometimes you hear we're triune, we're body, soul, and spirit. When we're born again, there are four parts of us. There's our spirit, which is the part that communes with God. It's the eternal part of us. We don't have a living spirit before we were born again. When you're born again, your spirit is born again. And that's where God lives. That's what part of us communes with God. And then we have a soul that is the seat of our will and emotions. And then we have a mind that is the seat of our intellect, and a body, obviously, that is our physical bodies. And this man said, well, the way I read the Bible is I'm supposed to love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. And Jesus said, that's it. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Here's what I want you to understand. There are four parts of us, and they were designed by God to love first. Your mind was not made by God simply to process information. Your mind was created by God to love first, to love Him first and your spouse first. Your body was made to love. Your spirit was made to love. Your soul was made to love. And marriage is the greatest demonstration of God's love on this earth. And the greatest marriage is when we learn to love from our spirit, from our mind, from our soul, and from our body. And that's what this seminar is about. And I want to talk to you in this session about becoming one heart in God. And this is a spiritual part of this seminar where we talk about, God being first and the most important thing in our relationship. Matthew 19, Jesus is being confronted here by some Jews asking him about marriage and divorce. And Jesus, it says, he answered and said to them, Have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. I want you to hear, what I'm saying. You hear sometimes people say marriage is just a piece of paper. Marriage is not a piece of paper. Marriage is an act of the Spirit of God, if there's a piece of paper or not. that when we get married, Jesus says what God has joined together, not what the government has joined together, because there are different laws, there are different governments. I know we have different countries watching right now. There are different laws. But when you get married, when you're standing at the altar and you're getting married, God is joining you heart to heart, spirit to spirit. That's what's happening there. And when they're asking him about their casual attitude about marriage and divorce, Jesus said, what God has joined together, you're not supposed to mess with. You're not supposed to do anything to diminish that connection there. Now, there's a little joke concerning marriage, and the joke goes like this. Marriage is about becoming one. The question is, which one? Okay. Because you know good and well, when you get married, a lot of times the fight begins. And begin to dominate each other. We begin to vie to see who's going to control this and that, whose thinking is going to dominate this or that. Well, let me answer the question for you. Marriage is about becoming one. The question is, which one? The answer is God. Becoming one in God is what makes us one, and it's called the miracle of marriage math. And here's the way the miracle of marriage math goes. 2 + 1 = 1. God made a couple. He came with them in the marriage in the Garden of Eden, and God coming into that marriage made them one. When you add God to your marriage becomes one in God. Here's another little math deal. 3 - 1 = 0. Adam and Eve rebelled against God. He was in the middle of them in the Garden of Eden. They were one. God created them one with Him in the Garden of Eden. When they sinned against Him, they had no marriage. Their marriage fell apart. The world fell apart when they rebelled against God. The only way that we can have one heart in marriage is to have one heart in God. And I know that can kind of seem kind of super spiritual and spooky. And what I want to do in the rest of this message is make it very practical for you. Karen and I almost divorced. We got married. We didn't know what we were doing. After several years of marriage, we almost divorced. And what I can say after 40 years, we've been married 40 years now. And what I can say after 40 years of marriage is this is my soulmate. This is the person that I'm my best friend, the person I'm glad I'm married to. But we have one heart. Our marriage we don't have a perfect marriage, but we have one heart. And we went from the place of almost divorcing to a place now of being one in God. And after 40 years of marriage and being happy and loving the fact that we're married and looking forward to the rest of our lives together. So I want to make it practical, and I want to talk to you about how to become one heart in God. And the first thing is to become one in God's purpose. To become one in God's purpose. So let me give you a principle here to start out with. Okay, you can only stay happily married if the reason you're married is greater than the stress that's on your marriage. Let me repeat that now. You can only stay happily married if the reason that you're married is greater than the stress that you're experiencing, and you always have stress on your marriage. There's always a stressor on your marriage. You know, whether it's a physical issue or kids or money or in-laws or work or something like that, there are always stressors on our marriage. And so to be happily married, the purpose, the reason for our marriage has to be great enough that it's greater than the stressors. And so the question is, why are you married? What is the purpose of your marriage? And when you ask a couple, you say, you know, did God put you together? They'll say yes, and kind of goo at each other when they're saying it, you know. Yes, God put us together. And then you say, why? And they say, huh? Is because a lot of times we're very vague in our understanding of the purpose of our marriage. And when you ask people, really put pressure on people and say, okay, tell me why you're married, they'll say things like this: to share our lives together. That makes sense, you know. To build a family. To share finances because we're soulmates. We're physically attracted to each other. We're in love, okay? So all those, there's nothing wrong with any of those answers per se, but remember, you can only stay happily married if the reason that you're married is greater than the stress that you're under right now. So let's just kind of go back through a few of those reasons and kind of look at them. You say, well, we got married because we want to share our lives together. Okay, we want to share our lives together. Well, okay, great. But what happens one day when you wake up and realize you accidentally married the devil? You know, or his ex-wife. I mean, you know, that's the way you feel. You know, you got married to share your lives together, but all of a sudden you wake up and everything's changed, and they've changed, and they're not sharing anymore. Either they've kind of gone away from the marriage, or they're dominating the marriage. They're not sharing. Okay, so I'm saying the reason you got married is now the stress that you're under. You got married because of your spouse. Now your spouse is the stress. You can only stay happily married if the reason that you're married is greater than the stress that you're under. And if you get married because you want to share your lives together, what happens when your spouse is the issue? Your reason is the stress. You say, well, we want to share our finances. You know, we have all these dreams for our finances. That's great, but what happens when there's nothing to share? You know, when you lost your job, when you've had a financial setback. And finances are the stress that you're under. And the number one reason people list as the reason they're divorcing is financial pressure. We got married because of finances. Now you're under financial pressure. Your reason is now your stress. And it's interesting, the top 3 reasons people marry are the top 3 reasons people list as the reason they're divorcing. So we're getting married for all these reasons, then they become the stress, and that's the issue, okay? You say, well, we're attracted to each other, and we're in love. Well, you know, what happens when you don't feel that way any longer? What happens when the chemistry isn't there? What happens when you're out of love and you're not feeling anything? Your feelings, the reason you got married, your feelings are now the stress that you're under, and you don't feel the way you used to feel anymore. Children, right on down the line, okay? So when these, and then they compound on each other. You have financial problems and child problems. You have work stress and you have physical issues. In other words, they begin to compound on each other, and now you have multiple stressors on your relationship, and what they do is they test the integrity of the purpose of your marriage. Did you choose a high enough purpose to keep you married when the stress comes on you? Okay, so Karen and I, this is what happened to Karen and I. We got married with all the best of intentions. I think if the reasons that I listed there, that's probably we want to share our lives together, we want to build a family, all of those reasons, but we were on the brink of divorce, and those were the stresses that we were under. So what changed in our marriage? We changed purposes. What saved our marriage, if you ask Karen and I, why did you make it? It's because we made our marriage about God. The number one purpose that we're married is to fulfill God's will in our lives, okay? We're married because of God. And so here's my question. Remember my principle now. You can only stay happily married if the reason that you're married is greater than the stress that you're under. Is any stress greater than God? No. He's the only reason that is greater than any stress that you'll ever be under. He's greater than money. He's greater than kids. He's greater than physical issues. He's greater than my job. He's greater than my past. He's greater than any giant, any mountain, any problem that I'll ever face. And so you ask Karen and I, why are you married? God. God is the only reason we're still married today, because we have gone through times of questioning. You know, did we make a mistake? Are we supposed to stay married? And no, we're married for life. But God is the reason that we're married, and what we have found is in the good times and the bad times, God is greater than any issue that we'll ever face. He's the only purpose of your marriage that can transcend any problem you'll ever face. But if you choose a lower purpose, I promise you, at some point, that purpose is going to become your stress. And that's when you go into a dilemma. And here's what it practically means to make God the purpose of your marriage. It means the purpose of our marriage is to glorify God, not to gratify ourselves. See, here's the issue. And all these other purposes are great, by the way. We share our lives together, we share finances, we build a family. There's nothing wrong with all of those under the banner of God, under the banner that we exist first to glorify God. But listen to me for just a minute, because we're believers, and this is a Christian seminar. I want to say something to you. Is it any wonder why so many marriages fail when the reason that we get married is so selfish? Let me say it another way. The number one reason that Karen and I are married isn't to get something, it's to give something to God. We want to give God glory through our lives and our children and our grandchildren and our ministry. We're not married, first of all, to get self-gratification. We are married, first of all, to give Him the glory that He deserves, because He created everything good on this earth and has given us every blessing under heaven. He deserves that glory. Amen. And I believe that one of the reasons that marriage is falling apart around the world is because we have taken God out of the equation, and it's all about us. And I'm saying it's all about God. In the Garden of Eden, God was there. He was a part